In this learning activity, I want to explore the stack column chart option in Excel. We have a scenario where we have a data set that summarizes all of a book company's sales for an entire year. We would like to create a stack column chart to visually summarize this information. So let's go ahead and open up the starting file and create a stack column chart and explore the various options that we have in creating those charts. When we open up the file, we see that we have the entire year broken down into the 4 quarters. We have the annual sales of used books, magazines, calendars, miscellaneous items, and refreshments. So basically, we would like to just visualize these sales figures for each quarter. And what I'm recommending is a stack column chart. So let's go ahead and open up the insert ribbon. And let's go to column. The first option here is the clustered. That would break down each of the sales figures, the used books, magazine, and so forth, into individual columns. We do have another option here called the stacked, and what essentially is going to happen here is that for the first quarter, we will have the used books and then the magazine stacked on top of the used books, and then the calendar stacked on top of the magazines, and so forth. So essentially, at the end of the stacking, we have a cumulative sum of the first quarter. So let's go ahead and explore this option. I'm going to start out with a clean slate, if you will. I'm going to resize this canvas just a little bit to sort of match the size of our data set. So once we start with a used canvas, there's a couple different ways of doing this, and the way I'm suggesting is that I want my categories, I want my clusters, what I would like is my clusters to be my quarters, and then per quarter I would like all of the annual sales stacked on top of this. So this is a little tricky if this is the first time you're dealing with charts. Let's go down to select data, and we can go to add series. The series name in this case is going to be used books, and this might be a little confusing at first, but let's go ahead with the example. My series values will be the 23,000 all the way to the fourth quarter 31,000. Okay, so we can actually see that we have all 4 quarters. I'm going to hit OK, and I'm trying to do this in a step-by-step fashion. We could edit the horizontal category label, and those will be first, second, third, and fourth. So we're seeing that at the bottom. So what we're seeing here first, before I add all of the other annual sales, is just the used books. We have other categories that we're going to stack on top, but this is the first layer. Basically summarized in the quarter fashion here, 1, 2, 3, 4. So what we could do is we could add those other series manually, and it doesn't hurt to add perhaps one more or so. The other thing that we can do is simply go to this range and drag this field down until we have all of the categories listed here. The other way to do this, if we were to do this manually, of course, is to right-click, select data, add another series. Series 2 would be our magazines. The series values will be the quarter values here. OK, add another series, add calendars. And let me add that again. I hit the wrong button. I meant to hit tab. And let's go ahead and add calendar values here. OK, add the miscellaneous, tab all these 4 values. OK, add the final one, refreshments, tab, and the refreshment values here. So I think this is a little easier to do this in this fashion. So I think the easier option would have been to simply start with the first option here, and I'm just hitting undo until I get to this point. The easier option would have been just to simply drag this down to let Excel take care of the hard work, but we can add those manually. Let's do a little bit of formatting. I would like to see at least axis labels. So I want both horizontal and vertical. Let's go ahead and reference the labels here. For the X, let's say we just want to type in the text quarter. And for the Y, perhaps annual sales, or perhaps just sales in general. There's a few things that we can do to make this a little bit more transparent to a user. One of the nicer options that Excel has is this data table. Let's go ahead and add a data table and show the data table with legend keys. So what we're actually seeing here, and I'm second guessing the use of this horizontal axis label, so I'm actually going to delete it and make this bigger by first of all deleting this legend, because actually we have the legend here. There's no reason to duplicate it. So I'm going to make this a little bit more legible by getting rid of some of that unnecessary information. Here I don't necessarily need these decimal places, so I'm going to trim that off as well. Right click, go to number, and simply remove the decimals to 0 and hit enter. Okay, so the data table is actually pretty nice because it gives you precisely the values that are given to calculate this entire width of the column, or the height of the column. So the biggest portion in the first quarter and in every quarter in general is the used book, the gray. And then, you know, compounding this up, we have the cumulative total of the sales per quarter. Visually, there's a few things that we can do here. One thing I just want to show you is that we do have different themes, and I left this on a theme that I was exploring called angles here, but usually by default it's this office. And I didn't necessarily mean to leave this before creating the video on angles here, but I just wanted to show you that you can actually play around with different themes in your workbook in case you get tired of just the basic office standard default format. So perhaps this one looks nice. I'll just go ahead and leave it on this one, but you can explore on your own the other options that you have available here. It gives you a little preview of the colors, but I like this one. I think this is nice. Let me go ahead and make that a little bit bigger. So now we have a column chart. I see picket fences, which is you know, kind of drives me nuts when I see it, so I'm going to go ahead and fix that. Now we have a column chart for each quarter, and then we basically get an idea of where our sales are coming from, because now we have stacked them together and now we have an idea of the cumulative total. So that's nice. I want to show you one more thing that you can do, which is pretty nice. Maybe we didn't want this graph categorized by quarter. I think it makes a lot of sense, but perhaps we wanted to flip the order. And I'm going to make a copy of that first graph and paste it right next to it. And what I'm going to do is actually right click on the copy and go to select data. There is a button here called switch rows and columns. We have the categories of our sales here and our quarters here. If we were to switch this, we would actually summarize this data a little bit differently. Now we have the used books, and now the legend is essentially telling us in quarter. So it kind of tells us when we're selling the most used books. So when we look at this olive sort of green, we can tell that the third quarter sales for used books is the lowest. Of course, we could actually just look at the data table, which is nice too. But I just wanted to show you that one particular option that you can easily switch that if you weren't happy with it. I'm going to make this graph a little bit bigger so we can see the labels here. One thing you could do, I'm noticing that these are on 2 lines. We could actually highlight or click on the entire graph and use this A down button to make our text a little smaller so it fits, which is pretty nice. As far as other things that we can do to summarize this, of course we can go into the individual colors. Let's say we don't like this green. We could change themes, of course. We could format data series. We could play around with the overlapping regions. By default it's 100, so they're stacked right on top, but if we wanted to stagger them a little bit, we could. We can control the gap width, so if we wanted very thin or very thick, we could change that a little bit. We could change the fills. We have this on automatic, but if I didn't like this green, perhaps I could change the solid fill to maybe black. I'll leave that black just to stand out a little bit. So there's various things we can do. We can change the borders. Maybe we give a bright yellow border to this. It's a little difficult to see, but there is now a yellow border around this black. Just to show you that yellow, let me make the fill a solid white and make the border color a black, so we can see that now. And border styles, we could actually make the line much thicker. Let me stop at around 3 and hit close. And so there's several things that we can do. I must have messed that up a little bit, so I'm going to change this border to a 3. We can see that's definitely increasing there. Let me just go ahead and lower that back to 0.75. Shadows and glow effects I don't use too much, but you can explore with that. I'm going to hit close. I'm going to undo Control Z our steps until we get back to that automatic color here, which I think looks good. But I did want to explore some of the options here. The table is definitely a nice touch to the graph. We can go to design options and change the various colors, perhaps even add some different default color choices that they have, and some of that glow and other things that I don't utilize much. We could actually play around with that too. So there's many different options in here to give us a little bit more control of our graphs. Let's see, layout. We can individually control what we're seeing. Perhaps we want to put the legend back on. We can always go here. We have different ways we can put the legend. Maybe we want the legend at the top. I don't think it's necessary because we have the legend here. The gray, sort of red, green, and perhaps olive color. We could add data labels if we wanted. And some of this doesn't necessarily make sense, but I at least want to show you that these options are available. We can control our axis. What do we see with our axis? Our grid line. I tend to put a vertical grid at some point to kind of separate the data a little bit. I don't think that looks that bad. Plot area and things like that we can control. And when you're doing analysis, there are a couple extra features here that is useful, but only if you're doing analysis and you are more familiar with the formatting options. The final format, there is a standard selection of items here that we can select, fills and outlines and effects and aligning that you can explore with. But I want to keep this on scope to the column, the stack column chart in general. So anyway, let me review quickly what we have done. We have a small little data set, if you will, which categorizes annual sales by these categories for every quarter, and we just simply wanted to explore the column chart to learn how to generate a stacked column chart, which is essentially at the end of the day a cumulative sum of these different categories. And of course, if we wanted to generate these numbers, well, one is to do it in the table, summarizing these values in the table with the data table. We could go further actually and move these charts down and simply do some other calculations with a quick sum per quarter. We could do a total for the used books for the year. We could even do a cumulative total, which would be first quarter cumulative would be 37. It would be a running total, so we would like to take the 37 plus the new second quarter value and fill that to the right. We can do a similar thing with the cumulative total for each of the annual sales per product. So the first one would be the 102,000. The next running total would be 102 plus the 21,000, and we can fill that formula down. So we can build a lot of these things into our table itself, but it's always nice to visually see these relationships too. So I'm just going to finalize by merge and centering this and doing an autofill. So anyway, it's a good habit to put in some of these extra formats of your charts. It's also a good idea to create a summary with totals and averages and whatever you'd like, just because when you need that information, you already have it generated.